New photos of Anthony Joshua's wrecked car show how he came within inches of death after a crash in Nigeria. The heavyweight British boxing champion was traveling in a Lexus Jeep when it smashed into a stationary truck shortly after 11 a.m. 2 of the 5 people involved in the crash tragically lost their lives, but Joshua survived with just minor injuries and was taken to a local hospital. A friend of the star said that he's okay, but badly shaken up.
I can't fight anymore. For words, that's it. No hype, no trash talk, no bravado. Just a sentence so heavy it landed like a knockout nobody saw coming. 1 minute, Anthony Joshua is still being discussed like a comeback king. The next minute, whispers start spreading that something is seriously wrong. Not bad training, not a tune-up gone sideways. Something deeper. Something permanent. At first, fans brushed it off. Boxing rumors live and die every week. But then the tone shifted. Sources stopped joking. Interviews started sounding careful. And suddenly, the phrase career-ending shoulder injury crept into the conversation like a ghost nobody invited. This isn't just another injury scare. This feels like the kind of revelation that makes promoters nervous, fans quiet, and legacies fragile. The kind of news that turns highlight reels into memorials overnight. Because when a heavyweight says he can't throw punches anymore, that's not strategy. That's surrender. And the timing. Brutal comeback talks still fresh. Big fights still floating in the air. Millions still on the table. Then boom. Reality shows up unannounced and flips the entire script. The internet exploded. Some people cried cap. Others said they saw this coming years ago. Memes tried to soften it, but even jokes felt uncomfortable. Because if this is real, this isn't the end of a fight. This is the end of an era. It didn't come out like a dramatic announcement. No press conference. No tears on camera. No slow-motion montage with inspirational music playing in the background. That's what made it terrifying. The first hint that something was seriously wrong with Anthony Joshua didn't sound like news. It sounded like discomfort, a pause in interviews, careful wording, a fighter who suddenly spoke more about health than hunger. Anthony Joshua has always been marketed like a machine. Built, engineered, polished. The heavyweight who looked like he was carved out of marketing. Budgets and Olympic dreams. Power, discipline, control. That image didn't allow room for weakness, especially not the kind that lingers in your shoulder and whispers, "You're done." The early leaks didn't say career ending. They never do. They said management. Load. Ongoing issues. The usual boxing vocabulary that fans have learned to translate as "don't panic yet." But behind the scenes, panic had already started stretching its legs. Training sessions weren't the same. Sparring rounds were shortened. Punch output quietly reduced, and anyone who knows boxing knows this truth. When a heavyweight starts protecting his shoulder, the clock is already ticking. The shoulder isn't just a joint in boxing. It's the ignition switch. It's how power transfers. It's how confidence flows. Lose trust in that, and every punch feels like a gamble. And according to whispers that leaked out of camps and gyms, Joshua wasn't just managing pain, he was managing fear. Fear that one wrong movement could turn temporary damage into permanent silence. Fans noticed before they understood. His punches didn't snap the same way. His combinations looked cautious. Even his posture felt different, like a man unconsciously guarding something fragile. Analysts tried to dress it up as evolution, smarter boxing, less reckless aggression. But evolution doesn't look hesitant. And hesitation is poison in the heavyweight division. Then came the line nobody was supposed to hear. "I can't fight anymore." Not shouted, not announced. Reportedly said in frustration, possibly off camera, possibly thinking it wouldn't leave the room. That's how the most dangerous truths escape. Quietly, once that sentence leaked, everything snapped into focus. Suddenly, the cautious interviews made sense. The delays made sense. The strange scheduling made sense. You don't stall negotiations unless you're buying time. And time is exactly what Anthony Joshua no longer had. The boxing world reacted. In stages, first, disbelief. Joshua had survived losses, criticism, pressure that crushed other champions. People assumed this was another mental hurdle, another chapter in the comeback narrative. But injuries don't respond to motivation speeches, and shoulders don't care about legacy. Medical speculation took over fast. Torn rotator cuff, nerve damage, chronic instability. Fans turned into orthopedic surgeons overnight, throwing around diagnoses like they were reading x-rays. The scariest part wasn't any single theory. It was the consistency. Every explanation ended the same way. Reduced power, limited movement, increased risk. Promoters stayed quiet, and that silence screamed louder than any statement. In boxing, silence usually means lawyers are reading contracts and accountants are adjusting projections. Big fights that once felt inevitable suddenly became unlikely. Conversations shifted from who's next to what's left. Joshua's camp tried to maintain composure. But even composure has cracks. When questions about timelines started getting vague answers, fans knew something was off. Fighters with manageable injuries talk dates. Fighters with career-threatening injuries talk health. Joshua was talking health. Critics resurfaced instantly. They said this was inevitable, that the wear and tear caught up, that fighting scared changed him, that the losses took something intangible. But this wasn't psychological. This was mechanical. Metal fatigue. A machine pushed too hard for too long. The brutal irony is that Anthony Joshua did things the right way. Olympic pedigree, controlled rise, strategic matchmaking, and yet, boxing doesn't reward planning forever. It collects payment eventually. As more details leaked, the picture got uglier. This wasn't a fresh injury. You rehab and bounce back. From this was cumulative damage. Years of torque. Years of explosive force ripping through the same joint. Each punch leaving a receipt the body finally cashed. That's when the narrative changed from concern to mourning. Not publicly, quietly. Fans revisited old knockouts, old highlights, moments where Joshua looked invincible. Those clips hit different. Now, like watching a storm, knowing the calm never lasts. The scariest realization wasn't that Anthony Joshua might retire. It was that his body might already have made the decision for him. Fighters can negotiate contracts. They can change trainers. At Teo, they can reinvent styles. Teo can't negotiate with joints that refuse to cooperate. By the end of this phase, the question wasn't, is Joshua injured? That was obvious. The question was whether boxing had already seen the last version of Anthony Joshua capable of being Anthony Joshua. Not a diminished presence. Not a careful technician avoiding damage. The heavyweight who shook arenas with every right hand, and once that question entered the room, it refused to leave. Because if the shoulder was truly done, then everything that followed wasn't about recovery. It was about acceptance, and the boxing world was nowhere near ready for that conversation. Once the phrase, Kerry Rending, escaped the rumor chamber, the situation stopped being private and turned into a public autopsy. Not because people wanted Anthony Joshua to fail, but because the boxing world has a reflex. When a giant stumbles, everyone leans in to see how hard the ground hits. The internet went into full chaos mode within hours. Some fans called it propaganda, claiming this was just negotiation pressure dressed up as tragedy. Others swore this was the same smokescreen fighters used before shocking everyone with a comeback. But that confidence didn't last. Because this time, the usual signals were missing. No defiant tweets, no shadowboxing clips. No, I'll be back stronger quotes plastered across timelines. It's just silence and carefully chosen words that felt final. Then the reactions from fighters started rolling in, and that's when the mood shifted from skepticism to concern. Heavyweights don't usually speak softly about rivals. But this time, the tone changed. Respect replaced trash talk. Fighters who once called Joshua overrated suddenly sounded measured, even sympathetic. And in boxing, sympathy is code for this might really be over. Former champions began talking about shoulders like veterans talk about war injuries. They didn't say heal up. They said those never feel the same again. That distinction mattered. One is encouragement. The other is a warning disguised as experience. Memes tried to lighten the mood, but even those felt awkward. Jokes about Joshua becoming a motivational speaker or starting a podcast landed flat. The humor felt forced, like laughing in a hospital. Waiting room because silence is too uncomfortable. Boxing fans are used to brutality in the ring, not fragility outside of it. Then came the conspiracy theories. Some fans claimed this was a setup to avoid dangerous matchups. Others argued this was promoters soft-launching retirement to protect long-term brand value. But those theories collapsed under one harsh reality. You don't sacrifice a global cash cow unless the risk outweighs the reward. And Anthony Joshua has always been a cash cow. Promoters started speaking in riddles. Phrases like, health comes first, and we're exploring all options replaced bold fight talk. Translation: nobody wants to be responsible for sending a compromised fighter into a heavyweight war. Because if something catastrophic happens, that stain never washes. The wildest twist came when sports medicine experts weighed in publicly. Not gossip blogs, not fan forums. Actual professionals explaining how shoulder degradation affects punching mechanics. They talked about nerve impingement, loss of explosive torque, and permanent power reduction. Suddenly, the conversation got clinical, and clinical talk kills hype fast. Pop culture comparisons exploded. People compared Joshua's situation to a supercar with a cracked engine block. Still beautiful, still valuable, but no longer safe to push to the limit. Others said this felt like watching a superhero realize their powers don't work mid-battle. Dramatic, yes, but painfully accurate. Public outrage followed, but it wasn't directed at Joshua. It turned toward boxing itself. Fans questioned why. Fighters are pushed through damage until something breaks permanently. Why warrior mentality gets praised until the bill comes due. Joshua's situation reopened debates boxing never wants trending. Long-term health. Post-career damage. Responsibility. Critics resurfaced, claiming Joshua's style always relied too heavily on power and athleticism. They argued that once his body failed, there was no fallback plan. Supporters fired back, pointing out that no amount of technique can replace a shoulder that won't fire. You can adapt footwork, can't fake force. The conversation also reignited debates about Joshua's past losses. Suddenly, people rewatched fights looking for signs they'd missed. Slight hesitations, reduced output. Moments where he didn't pull the trigger. What once looked like tactical caution now looked like self-preservation. Retrospective analysis is brutal because it rewrites history without mercy. Meanwhile, Anthony Joshua himself remained distant from the noise. No dramatic denials, no public breakdowns. That restraint made things feel heavier. Fighters who plan comebacks usually can't stay quiet. Silence suggests acceptance, or at least preparation for a reality that fans aren't ready to face yet. The public started asking uncomfortable questions. If Joshua can't fight, what happens to the heavyweight landscape? Entire fight cards were built around his name. Stadium shows, international deals, broadcast plans. His absence doesn't just affect rankings, it shakes infrastructure. Other fighters began positioning themselves subtly, like chess pieces sensing the board has changed. Opportunities opened, narratives shifted, and that's when people realized how fast boxing moves on. Brutally fast. Even legends get replaced when the business needs momentum. By the end of this phase, denial was gone. Hope was fragile. The conversation had matured into something quieter, but far more serious. People weren't asking if Joshua could return anymore. They were asking should he, and that question split the audience harder than any trash talk ever could. Because wanting a fighter back and wanting them safe are not the same thing. As the dust settled, one truth hovered over everything. Anthony Joshua wasn't just fighting opponents anymore. He was fighting biology. And biology has a perfect record. And once that realization sets in, the story doesn't get louder. It gets heavier. By the time the conversation reached this stage, it wasn't loud anymore. It was heavy. That's how you know a story has crossed from rumor into reckoning. Anthony Joshua's shoulder injury didn't just threaten his next fight. It threatened the version of him the world had already archived in its memory. And once legacy enters the chat, every word hits harder. The aftermath didn't begin with an announcement. It began with absence. No fight dates, no training footage, no confident soundbites about redemption. Just a heavyweight-sized void where anticipation used to live. And in boxing, absence is brutal. It forces people to imagine endings before they're confirmed. Anthony Joshua's reputation started shifting in real time, not collapsing. Reframing, the narrative slowly moved away from comeback king and toward what could have been. That transition is dangerous territory for any fighter. Because boxing history is unforgiving. It remembers highlights, but it also remembers exits. And exits matter. Fans began debating his career with a new tone. Not angry, not dismissive, reflective. Joshua was no longer just a current contender. He became a case study. Olympic gold, unified heavyweight champion, global icon. And now, possibly, a man forced to listen to his body before his ambition finished the sentence. The shoulder injury reframed everything. Losses that were once attributed to tactics or confidence suddenly looked physical in hindsight. Hesitation made sense. Reduced output felt logical. The idea that Joshua may have been fighting compromised for longer than anyone realized hit fans like delayed shock. Relationships in the sport adjusted quietly. Promoters stopped teasing megafights. Broadcasters softened their language. Commentators started using phrases like "if he returns" instead of "when." That shift is subtle, but lethal. Boxing lives in certainty. Once certainty cracks, so does momentum. Joshua's inner circle became more protective. Public messaging leaned toward health, future, and life beyond the ring. That alone told people everything they needed to know. Fighters who plan to fight soon don't talk about life after boxing. That conversation only surfaces when the door is already closing. Public perception matured. The memes stopped. The arguments slowed. Respect took over where debate once lived. Even critics acknowledged the truth nobody wants to face. The heavyweight division doesn't forgive compromised bodies. One wrong punch, one unstable shoulder, and the consequences are irreversible. The question of responsibility loomed large. Not just for Joshua, but for the sport. Fans started asking whether boxing pushes fighters to ignore warning signs until damage becomes permanent. Joshua's injury became symbolic of a larger problem. Warrior culture praised until it breaks. People permanently. Anthony Joshua's legacy began crystallizing whether he wanted it to or not. He wasn't being remembered for a single injury. He was being remembered as a fighter who carried an entire era on his shoulders, literally and figuratively. Stadiums, global audiences, expectations that would crush lesser athletes. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Walking away now might protect his body, but it complicates his mythology. Boxing doesn't reward caution. It romanticizes sacrifice. And choosing health over glory will always divide fans. Some will call it wisdom. Others will whisper, what if forever? If Joshua never fights again, his story becomes one of unrealized final chapters. The champion who never got the fairy tale ending. The heavyweight who gave boxing spectacle but left before the last act. That kind of legacy isn't weak, it's tragic. And tragedy lingers longer than victory. If he does return, the expectations will be brutal. No grace, period. No patience. Every punch scrutinized. Every movement questioned. One hint of vulnerability and the narrative will eat him alive. Because once injury enters the story, it never leaves. The boxing world also had to confront its own reality. Without Joshua, the division loses a commercial anchor, a crossover star, a figure casual fans recognized instantly. His absence doesn't just change rankings, it changes economics. That pressure alone tempts comebacks that shouldn't happen. Joshua's silence remained the loudest statement. No dramatic farewell, no denial tour, just restraint. And restraint in boxing is rare. It suggests a man wrestling with decisions that don't fit inside press conferences. This wasn't about fear. It was about consequence. A shoulder injury isn't like a cut or a fracture. It's structural. It's trust. Once a fighter stops trusting their body, the ring becomes a dangerous place. The public finally accepted what it didn't want to admit. Anthony Joshua might not be able to finish his story the way fans imagined. And that acceptance didn't feel like defeat. It felt like maturity, because legends aren't defined only by how they fight. They're defined by how they exit. And sometimes, the bravest move in a brutal sport is knowing when not to throw another punch. The cliffhanger remains cruel. Will Joshua return for one last attempt? Will he protect his future and walk away? Nobody knows yet. But one thing is certain. The Anthony Joshua era has already changed. And once an era shifts, boxing never rewinds the tape. It only moves forward, with or without you. And this is where the gloves come off and the conversation gets real. Because this isn't just about Anthony Joshua's shoulder. This is about legacy, sacrifice, and the brutal price boxing charges when the bill finally comes due. One injury just forced the entire sport to slow down and ask a question it hates. Answering, when is enough? Enough. So now, it's on you. Should Anthony Joshua walk away while he still owns his future, or should he risk everything for one last run at greatness? Stepping back wisdom, or does boxing only respect those who go out on their shield? Drop your honest takes in the comments, because this debate doesn't have a safe answer. If this breakdown hit you harder than a right hand you didn't see coming, do us a favor. Smash that like button like it owes you money. Hit subscribe like. The next fight rumor is already brewing behind closed doors. And turn on notifications so you're always first when another "everything's fine" moment turns into a full-blown boxing emergency. At Punch Press, we don't just report the fights. We break down the truths nobody wants to hear until it's too late. While other channels chase hype, we chase consequences. The sport moves fast, but the damage lasts forever. And we're here to call it out every time. So stay locked in. Stay sharp, and remember this name, Punch Press, because in boxing, the hardest hits don't always land in the ring. Sometimes they land in reality. And in reality.